I still remember the day the world turned upside down for me. The sun rose lazily over our small village, draping the fields in gold. But all I felt was a hollow weight in my chest. My father, Baba Elias, the man whose laughter once filled our time, I laughed who once filled our home, was gone. The old house felt too quiet, the air too heavy, and the walls seemed to echo my loneliness. People came in droves that morning. Neighbors, distant relatives, and old friends gathered under the mango tree in our yard, whispering stories of my father's kindness. They spoke of the times he had given his last meal to a hungry stranger or spent nights repairing tools for farmers who couldn't afford to pay. But to my older brothers and sisters, the day meant something else entirely. Finally, muttered my eldest brother, Simon, pacing the courtyard, we can divide his property and start fresh. I stood there silently, clutching my father's old walking stick. To them, Baba's passing meant inheritance land, livestock, and maybe even the few savings they believed he had tucked away. To me, it felt like a hollow victory. That afternoon, we gathered in a dusty lawyer's office in town for the reading of the will. The room smelled of aged paper and ink. My siblings were tense, their faces a mixture of anticipation and greed. I could almost hear their thoughts racing. Who will get the most? The lawyer, a thin man with round glasses, adjusted his spectacles and began. Elias Mukendi, in his final testament, leaves the following to his children. Simon and my sister Ruth straightened up, their eyes wide, ready for the riches they imagined. To my eldest son, Simon, I leave the eastern field. Simon smirked. He had always wanted the fertile land near the river. To my daughter Ruth, I leave the livestock and the storage barn. Ruth beamed, already calculating the profit she could make by selling them. The lawyer cleared his throat before reading the final part. And to my youngest son, Daniel, all eyes turned to me. I leave my old wooden chest, my broken radio, and my leather-bound notebook. The room erupted in laughter. Simon slapped his thigh. A chest, a broken radio. Is that it? Ruth snorted, covering her mouth with her hand. Even in death, Father pampers you with his junk, Danny. I stared at the lawyer, waiting for him to continue to reveal that this was just a prelude to something more substantial. But he simply folded the papers and said, "That concludes the will." The laughter stung, but I forced myself to stand tall. "Thank you," I said quietly, taking the small key to the chest. On the way home, my siblings teased me relentlessly. "Maybe the radio still works," Simon mocked. "You can tune into stations from the afterlife?" Ruth chimed in. "Or maybe that notebook's worth something like kindling for the fire." I bit my tongue. I wanted to tell them that our father was not a man who did things without purpose. There had to be a reason he left me those things. But even as I tried to believe it, doubt gnawed at me. That night, alone in my room, I placed the chest on the floor. Its surface was worn, the wood scarred with age. I hesitated before opening it, afraid of finding nothing more than the junk my siblings believed it to be. With a deep breath, I turned the key. Inside lay a few items. The broken radio, a faded photograph of my father as a young man, and a tattered leather-bound notebook. I picked up the notebook, its pages yellowed with time, and flipped through it. Most of it was filled with my father's neat handwriting stories, numbers, strange sketches of plants and places I didn't recognize. Then, on the last page, a single line caught my eye. "When all else fails, listen to the land it remembers what men forget." I stared at the words, confused, yet strangely moved. I didn't know it then, but that sentence would change everything. For days, I could not shake that single line. When all else fails, listen to the land it remembers what men forget. I carried the notebook everywhere, thumbing through its fragile pages whenever I had a spare moment. The handwriting was my father's firm yet graceful and filled with sketches of plants, maps of places I did not know, and short, cryptic notes. I turned the broken radio over in my hands, hoping it might come to life, but the dial was stuck, and the speaker crackled only with silence. My siblings made no secret of their delight in my apparent misfortune. Simon and Ruth had already started selling off their inheritance. Simon boasted of plans to lease the eastern field to a wealthy farmer. Ruth sold most of the livestock, lining her pockets with quick cash. "Daniel," Simon said one evening, "why don't you just burn that junk and move on? Father left you nothing but memories." I said nothing. A part of me almost believed him, but every time I held the notebook, I felt a quiet pull, as if my father's spirit were guiding me towards something unseen. Late one night, by the dim glow of an oil lamp, I pored over the notebook again. Tucked between two pages was a folded piece of parchment, brittle with age. Carefully, I unfolded it. It was a hand-drawn map. The landmarks were unfamiliar mountain ridges, a winding river, and a mark shaped like an X near a cluster of trees. On the back of the map, my father had scribbled, "For the one who chooses to listen." I knew then I had to go. At first light, I packed a small bag with essentials: water, dried meat, and the notebook. I slung the old radio across my shoulder. Why? I wasn't sure, and set out toward the northern hills, guided only by my father's map. The path was rugged, winding through fields scorched by the sun and overgrown with thorny bushes. As I walked, I remembered my father's words from long ago. "The land speaks. Daniel, if you are patient, it will tell you its secrets." By midday, I reached the edge of a village I had never visited. Tired and thirsty, I stopped at a small roadside stall run by an elderly woman. She eyed the notebook in my hand. "That book," she said softly. "Where did you get it?" "It belonged to my father," I replied. "Elias Mukendi." Her face lit up with recognition. "Ah, Elias. Many years ago, he came through here, helped us during the drought. He spoke often of seeds that could heal the land. You must be his son." I nodded, surprised that even here, far from home, people remembered him. She pointed toward the hills in the distance. "If you follow the river past the third bend, you will find the grove he always spoke of. Few know the way." By sunset, I found myself standing before the grove marked on the map. It was overgrown and wild, the trees twisted with age. Birds chattered in the branches, and the air hummed with the scent of earth and life. I sat beneath one of the largest trees, pulling out the broken radio. It seemed ridiculous, but something compelled me to turn the stiff dial. After several tries, a faint crackle filled the air, followed by an old recording, my father's voice, weak but unmistakable. "Daniel, if you are hearing this, then you have chosen to trust me. This grove holds the seeds of the murem tree. They are rare and precious, capable of healing soil and saving lives. Guard them well, for they are the true inheritance of our family." My hands trembled. I dug carefully around the base of the tree and uncovered a small, weathered gourd sealed with wax. Inside were tiny, dark seeds. Tears welled in my eyes. My father hadn't left me junk. He had left me a legacy. That night, I camped under the stars, the gourd cradled close to my chest. I realized the enormity of what I held. These seeds could transform barren land, feed villages, and perhaps change countless lives. But I also knew my siblings would never understand. To them, wealth meant money, land, and possessions. They would scoff at seeds, just as they had mocked the chest and the radio. As I drifted off to sleep, I whispered to the night, "I'll protect your legacy, Baba. I promise." When I returned home after days on the road, the village already buzzed with news of my siblings' triumphs. Simon boasted about the profits he was earning by leasing the eastern field. and Ruth paraded new clothes bought from the sale of our father's livestock. To them, Baba's passing had been nothing more than an opportunity to enrich themselves quickly. I arrived with nothing more than a weathered gourd of seeds, my father's notebook, and a quiet resolve. The mockery returned Simon spotted me as I crossed the yard, dusty and exhausted. "Well, well," he said, smirking, "the wanderer returns. Did you find your treasure chest of gold?" Ruth leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "Or did you finally realize father left you nothing but junk?" I met their laughter with silence. Inside, anger simmered, but I remembered my father's words, "When all else fails, listen to the land." I walked past them without a word, clutching the gourd to my chest. That evening, I prepared a small patch of neglected soil behind our father's old house. The earth was dry and cracked, but I trusted the seeds. I dug shallow furrows, planted each seed carefully, and whispered a silent prayer over them. Days turned into weeks. At first, nothing happened. My siblings mocked me relentlessly. Daniel, still playing farmer with father's magic beans. Simon taunted. Ruth added, "Even the soil knows junk when it sees it." But slowly, green shoots began to push through the earth. They grew taller and stronger with each passing day, their leaves a deep, vibrant green, unlike any plant I had ever seen. Villagers passing by began to notice. One morning, old Mama Chiku stopped to examine the young plants. "A child," she said, softly, awe in her voice. "Are these myram trees? I haven't seen them in decades. They can restore barren land and heal the sick. Do you know what you have here?" Her words spread quickly through the village, and soon people came from neighboring towns to see the miraculous grove. Farmers begged for seeds to plant in their own fields, and healers requested leaves for medicine. As the months passed, the grove flourished. The once dead soil around our father's house now teemed with life, and the myram trees grew tall and proud. I sold seedlings at fair prices, ensuring that even the poorest farmers could afford them. Slowly, money began to flow in, but more importantly, hope returned to our community. Meanwhile, Simon and Ruth's fortunes began to wane. The wealthy farmer who leased Simon's land defaulted on payments, leaving him with nothing. Ruth's quick profits dried up as the livestock buyers cheated her. One evening, he stood at the edge of my thriving grove, watching villagers gather seedlings. Simon muttered, "All this from the seeds father left you." "Yes," I replied simply. "The seeds he trusted me to protect." That night, as I pored over my father's notebook once more, I discovered an envelope tucked into the back cover. Inside was a letter written in my father's familiar handwriting. "My dearest Daniel, I know my gift may seem small, but within it lies the strength of our family. The world measures wealth by what can be counted, but true inheritance lies in what can be cultivated. These seeds will outlive gold, for they give life where there is none. Protect them, and they will protect you." Reading those words, I felt my father's presence beside me, as if he were watching the grove grow with the same quiet pride I felt. A few weeks later, Simon and Ruth came to me, their pride visibly wounded. "Daniel," Simon began hesitantly, We made mistakes. Everything we had is gone. Can you help us?" I looked at them, my once proud siblings, who had mocked and belittled me. I could have turned them away, but my father's legacy was not one of bitterness. "Come," I said, leading them to the grove. "These trees belong to all of us. Let's rebuild together." For the first time in months, I saw gratitude in their eyes. The Mirembe Grove became more than a cluster of trees behind my father's house, became a lifeline. Farmers from neighboring villages came in droves, carrying dry soil in their hands, hoping to bring life back to their lands. Healers took leaves for medicine, and the once quiet village turned into a bustling hub of activity. Word of the miracle trees spread farther than I ever imagined. Merchants from the nearest city arrived, offering to buy seedlings in bulk. I refused most offers, remembering my father's words. True inheritance is not what we keep, but what we carry forward. I sold enough to sustain the grove and my family, but the real wealth was in watching barren fields bloom again. Simon and Ruth slowly set aside their pride. Simon learned to tend the grove, waking before sunrise to water the young saplings. Ruth began organizing seed distributions to villages in need. The siblings who once mocked me now worked by my side, slowly rebuilding their lives. One afternoon, Ruth approached me as I was pruning a young tree. "Daniel," she said softly, "I owe you an apology. We laughed at you, mocked Father's gift, and yet here we are living because of it." I smiled faintly. "You were not the only ones who doubted. Even I questioned it at first." Baba knew what he was doing. Simon, overhearing, added, "I used to think land and livestock were the only forms of wealth. Now I see the truth. This grove, it's life itself." Months later, as I leafed through my father's tattered notebook, yet again, a small slip of paper fell out, brittle with age. It was a bank certificate, faded but still legible, indicating a deposit in my father's name at the bottom. A note in his handwriting read, "For the day the grove stands on its own. Use this to carry its legacy beyond our home." I was stunned. My father had left a modest fortune, untouched, waiting for the right time. With it, I established a foundation to expand the cultivation of miram trees across the region. Villages that had known only hunger began to thrive. Their lands fertile and green, our once forgotten home became the heart of a movement. We trained farmers, distributed seedlings, and shared knowledge about the miram trees. Families that had been on the brink of despair now harvested abundant crops. Children who once went to bed hungry now ran through fields laughing, their bellies full. The villagers began calling me Keeper of the Legacy, but I knew I was only fulfilling my father's vision. Every time I saw a farmer's face light up at the sight of a sprouting seedling, I felt Baba's presence beside me. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Simon, Ruth, and I stood together at the grove's edge. "Do you think Father knew it would come to this?" Simon asked quietly. I nodded. He always believed in the power of giving life. He just needed someone willing to listen. Ruth wiped away a tear. "We thought he'd left you junk. But this is the greatest gift any of us could have received." For the first time since Baba's passing, I felt peace settle over me. Seasons passed, and the grove flourished into a vast forest of life. The once barren land now sang with the hum of bees, the rustle of leaves, and the laughter of children who played beneath the shade of the towering miram trees. What began as a few seeds in an old gourd had grown into a legacy that stretched far beyond anything I had imagined. I often walked the grove alone at dusk, the golden light bathing the leaves in a warm glow. In those moments, I felt closest to my father. I could almost hear his voice in the wind, repeating the words that had guided me. "When all else fails, listen to the land, it remembers what men forget." Simon and Ruth stood beside me one evening, watching villagers gather seedlings to take to distant farms. "Daniel," Simon said quietly, "we used to laugh at you. We thought Father left you nothing, but now I see. We were blind." Ruth nodded, her voice trembling. "This isn't just your inheritance, it's ours too. And it's bigger than all of us." I smiled. "Father didn't leave us wealth to hoard. He left us something to grow and share. That's the true inheritance." With the foundation we built, thousands of miram seedlings were planted across the region. Villages once crippled by drought now flourished. Farmers who had lost all hope returned to their fields with renewed faith. The trees healed more than the land. They healed our family, our community, and, in a way, me. One day, I stood before a gathering of villagers, holding my father's tattered notebook. My father's legacy, I said, was not the chest, the radio, or even these trees. It was the lesson that true wealth isn't measured in gold or possessions, but in the lives we touch and the hope we leave behind. As night fell and I closed the notebook for the last time, I whispered, "Thank you, Baba." I finally understood. They had all called it junk, but in the end, it was the only thing that truly mattered. And so, dear listener, remember this. The treasures that change the world are not always glittering or grand. Sometimes they're hidden in the things others throw away. Cherish the values passed down to you, for they may be the seeds of tomorrow's greatest forests. Thanks for watching. Hoped you liked it. If you watched till the end, please comment "end" so that we could understand you were with us till the end. As well as, please let us know, where are you watching from? Before leaving, please hit the subscribe button, comment your thought, and share with your nearest and dearest one. I'll see you in the next one. Till to the next one, stay happy. Goodbye.